a CNN commentator. I think that is unacceptable. I think that is the President of the United States taking things way too far. It is an incitement to violence. He is going to get somebody killed in the media.
This is a blatant effort to intimidate witnesses. It's an incitement to violence.
We are deeply troubled by Wednesday's attack on the U.S. Capitol, which demonstrated clearly the destructive impact of sustained, deliberate distortion of facts and incitement to violence and hatred.
In his comments, Ye posted this tweet that includes a photo of Elon Musk and the caption, "Let's always remember this as my final tweet." Musk later tweeting, "I tried my best. Despite that, he again violated our rule against incitement to violence. Account will be suspended."
After a close review of recent tweets from the real Donald Trump account and the context around them, we have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence.
We are concerned that some of the protesters were clearly displaying symbols of racial and ethnic hatred and white supremacy.
Why am I here today? I'm here to talk about incitement to violence. So you may have seen my previous documentary, Is Racism a Sin? America, a Racial Reckoning, or my other documentary, America and Israel, Jesus and Judas. Both of these films contain some rather controversial subjects, including the difference between religions and the difference between the races, as well as the difference between genders. But most controversial in most people's eyes are openly discussing the reality of the different races and the reality of the different religions, and that there are major implications when you try to force them, the groups of people who follow these things, into living in the same space together, cohabitating, but holding very, very different beliefs, very different traditions and priorities, cultural lifestyles, ways of life. And we're seeing that unfold in real time as America is host to so many diverse ethnic populations and diverse religious beliefs. With the situation in Gaza unfolding, we now have people who are pro-Israel, and obviously that would include the Jewish people especially, but we have Christian Zionists as well. But you have this party of people who are devoutly in support of Israel rioting in the streets against people who are pro-Palestine, who are mostly Muslim and Arab individuals, but also the left, in terms of the political spectrum, are typically supporting Palestine in this, and because they see Israel as an expansion of the white man's colonialism. So these subjects are quite controversial, as my documentaries went into great detail to try to parse apart what's the difference between controversy and morality. Something being controversial and emotional when we discuss it doesn't necessarily mean it's immoral. Looking at group statistics and group behavior, for example, as we went deeply into in Is Racism a Sin? There's nothing racist about charts and graphs and numbers and statistics and analyzing group behavior. But when you provide these statistics and you look at the 30,000-foot view of Israel's history and what they're doing, or the relation between the different races in America, it's easy to see that there is a conformity and a consistency when it comes to group behavior. Jews tend to do certain things with certain priorities, blacks do certain things with certain priorities, whites do certain things with certain priorities, as do Hispanics, as do Indians, etc. Even when I go so far as to create an hour-and-a-half long documentary with 50 plus sources to support my argument, I'll hear something as pithy of a comeback as, well, it just requires emotional intelligence to handle these subjects, and the way you're discussing them is an incitement to violence, where people might respond in a way towards the group of people that you're talking about in a way that is harmful. So if you talk about the patterns of the FBI crime statistics, and that black people disproportionately to the degree of 4 or 5x commit half of the violent crime in America, despite black males only being 6% of America, they'll say that that's some kind of potentially set off race riots, and that black people will respond with violence to those statements. Or conversely, that you might be suggesting that white people should go and confront black people with violence. That is a common retort that I hear when we discuss the situation with race relations in America. And similarly, you'll hear those same arguments when you talk about being anti-Israel or anti any religion other than Christianity. They'll say that if you call somebody a Satanist, or say that somebody is practicing Satanism, Because by default, anything not following Jesus Christ as a Christian, we believe, is simply a deception of Satan. It doesn't matter which other religion you're choosing, religious practice, paganism, atheism, Buddhism, Sikhism. It doesn't matter. You can pick any of them. If you're a Christian, you believe in John 14:6, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me, meaning there is no way to have a relationship with God or have yourself saved other than devout faith in Jesus Christ as God. There is no other option. There are no other realities when it comes to religion. If you hold that belief as a Christian and you say that because of this belief, I have no justification to support the state of Israel. The state of Israel, in concept, the conceptual design of Zionism is to have a reserved space for Jewish people to practice their religion. Well, why would a Christian care about that at all? It's a protection so that somebody can practice Satanism, in the same way that it's not particularly important for me to go and make sure that there are protective borders surrounding India to make sure that the majority of their population can practice Hinduism and the rest of them be Sikhs. Like, that's just not a priority of a Christian. In fact, it's the anti-priority of a Christian. We believe in spreading the gospel far and wide to every corner of the globe. That was the purpose of the New World and bringing the gospel to America. It wasn't to come here and genocide all the native people who were living here and take their land and get rich and fat. It was to bring the word of God to the people who had not been exposed to it. But once again, if you as a Christian come out and devoutly say, I can't support Israel for what they're doing, there's 10,000, now 11,000 dead Gazans, and almost half of them are children, 75% of which of these people never voted for Hamas, just based on their age alone. They couldn't have even been old enough to vote for Hamas when they took leadership 17 years ago. You would have had to have been 17 years ago. So you would have had to have been 30 something, meaning the entire population who was below like 35 in Gaza, which is 75% of the population, literally could not have voted for Hamas. They did not vote for this leadership. They didn't vote for this method of retaliation or whatever you call Hamas, a terrorist group or whatever. They didn't vote for that. Yet now 10,000 of them are dead and counting. And so once again, as a Christian, we have every moral authority to say that we don't like seeing people die by the tens of thousands by the hands of Jewish supremacy. We don't want to see that. So I feel like we have a pretty fair claim to make. But once again, if you come out and are critical of Israel or critical of Israel's government or critical of Judaism or the Jewish culture, if you do any of these things, once again, you are said to have been inciting violence towards Jewish people, inciting violence in general. Likewise, if I come out and say, I don't believe in protecting a space so that people can practice Islam, like that's not a priority for me either. Oh, you must be Islamophobic. It's like, no, I am just a warrior for Christ. I believe that Christ is the only option because that's what Jesus said himself. I'm following the New Testament. This is not very complicated. Most Christians should be on my side, if not all Christians. But this Zionist brainwashing that has happened over the last several decades has fully captured American Christendom and made them believe that we are somehow Judeo-Christian partners, despite the fact that they killed Jesus and they write in their holy doctrine in the Talmud that Jesus is in hell burning in a pot of excrement and that Mother Mary was not a virgin, rather she was a prostitute and a whore. So once again, I'm not inciting violence by saying I don't support Israel as an entire nation, nor do I support Judaism as a religion. These people are openly anti-Christ, literally anti-Christ. You have no moral authority to come at me and bludgeon me over the head with you're inciting violence towards Jews when I simply practice my Christian faith by saying that there are no other alternatives other than Jesus Christ in terms of having a relationship with God. And so I can't stand behind your theoretical argument that you have to have a protected space to practice your religion that I don't believe in. I don't expect you to make sure Christians have a nation of their own that is protected so that they can practice their religion in perpetuity for the rest of time. Rather, what I expect is for Christians to band together and to create that situation. I don't expect Muslims to help Christians create their own country. I don't expect Hindus to do the same. This just makes common sense. Now, the meat of this topic, though, is the subject of incitement to violence. What does that mean? This idea of incitement to violence is used in virtually every societal conversation out there. You'll often see this incitement to violence argument used against Christians when we come out against the LGBTQ or the transgender movements. If you simply expose the very, very high correlation of pedophilia with homosexuality, then you're called a homophobic person who is inciting violence towards homosexuals, because the implication is, oh, well, you must be saying all homosexuals are pedophiles. And what that means is that all you Bible-thumping Christians are going to go out with guns and try to kill all the homosexuals. That's what the censors, and that's what the leftists, and that's what the Jewish people, and that's what the homosexuals, and that's what everybody wants you to believe, so that you simply stop criticizing them. And that is at the root what political correctness is about. It is a cudgel that they use to beat you over the head to get you to stop talking about the things that are important to them that many people don't find so important, in fact, find harmful. They want the perception to be that everybody agrees with this, and if you don't agree with it, you're a bad person. So bad that you simply disagreeing with it is the same as causing genocide, slaughter, and the loss of innocent life, etc. We saw the same thing with COVID. If you don't wear a face mask and if you don't get vaccines, then you're a genocidal grandmother killer. You're killing people left and right. You're going to cause millions of people to die. It is this same thing over and over again. Everything you do that they disagree with is an incitement to violence and mass death. If you disagree with Judaism, if you disagree with LGBTQ, if you disagree with multiculturalism, all of these things are synonymous to them with incitements to violence. You're akin to Hitler. You're going to get tens of millions of people killed. And this just, it doesn't make sense because that's not the pattern of history. That's not what we see in America. What else can I say about this political correctness obsession that America has? The obvious is that it is used to control the narrative and to silence dissent. So what you can see across all of these different conversations in society, whether it's racial, whether it's religious, whether it's cultural, this whole you're being politically incorrect, you're inciting somebody to violence thing, we need to start taking it both ways. Because what they say is that for every conservative view that you have, whether it's the Second Amendment, whether it's being against gay marriage, whether it's against allowing transgender surgeries and transgender hormone clinics, whether it's against religions other than Christianity, they say all of these things are incitement to violence. You're going to get a whole bunch of people killed. So let's play their game and look at their policies and suggest how they might be inciting people to violence and they might be getting lots of people killed. So when we continue to see these Jewish authors publish books that say white people have been known to be the most evil because they did what? The North American slave trade, and they colonized many countries throughout Europe, Africa, and elsewhere. That's why white people are supposed to be seen as evil. Now, wouldn't it be fair for me as a white person to say that, hey, when you publish a book saying whiteness is dangerous, that maybe that's an incitement to violence against the 60% of America that is white? When you say simply by being white, that's dangerous? That sounds a lot like when I talk about FBI crime statistics and point out the 1350 number that we all know about. You say I'm inciting violence by referring to actual FBI crime statistics that show that black people disproportionately to the degree of 5 or 6x commit more violent crimes than whites. You say that's an incitement to violence and that's going to get a bunch of black people killed by white people. However, when you say whiteness is dangerous to society and you provide no meaningful data to support that, there's no meaningful data that shows that people, because of their racial identity, the fact that they are white, maybe they want to have a white country, a majority white population, all that. With those beliefs, they have carried those out and committed mass murder. Has that happened in America? Are there fringe cases of violent individuals going and committing crimes? You know, you look at these mass shootings where largely they're MK Ultra operations, false flags, gun grab kind of situations. But even those that aren't, where it's just one psychotic individual and they know about the Great Replacement, the white genocide that's going on, because they include that in their diary, they would then say that, oh, look, here is proof. Here is proof that talking about what's happening to the white race causes people to be violent. Well, looking at the facts, you have a clearly psychotic individual. And by psychotic, I mean homicidal and suicidal, because these mass shooters don't live at the end. They die, everybody they target dies, they're homicidal and suicidal. That qualifies to be psychotic. Now, whether or not they hold views that are similar to people like myself who are completely nonviolent, who preach peace, who preach peaceful resolutions to these cultural problems that we have, the only thing we have in common is that we recognize that America used to be a 90% white country and now it's 60% and everything has gotten meaningfully worse. The fact that no other ethnic groups have created cultures like the European countries. When we point out these things, they're not incitements to violence. These are just observations of the world and observations of the different races and observations of the different societies and economies and ways of life that different races manifest themselves. But they say, well, this shooter over here believed all those same things, and it must be because of that belief that they went and killed a bunch of people. So let me ask you this. If you are a climate Nazi and you say, hey, these gas companies, Exxon, BP, Shell, and so on, they're going to destroy the whole planet. They're going to make it so that it's not even worth having kids because the planet's just going to die before then anyway. If you paint these people as the people on Earth who are causing more suffering than we can ever calculate, wouldn't it be reasonable to suggest that you are inciting violence against those people? Wouldn't it be reasonable to say that if somebody heard you talking about climate change and how it's going to wipe out all of us if we don't immediately do something about it, if a young, impressionable, psychotic individual heard that and then they walked into the headquarters of British Petroleum and they shot up the boardroom, who would you blame for that? Would you blame that psychotic individual? Or would you go and blame the YouTube content creator who said that climate change is real and we have to do something about it? Does that make sense to you? Would it make sense to go and blame the person who exposes an issue for the violence? Or would it be more rational to blame the person who committed the violence for the violence? Another example is just how critical the average society is of the white race. When they talk about this history of slavery and the history of colonialism, wouldn't it be fair to me to say that, hey, when you continue to portray white people in this inherently evil way, that it's just in their blood, it's just in their DNA, it's just what they do, would that not invoke some kind of response in non-white people to go and target white people? Aren't you inciting violence when you do that? I don't believe that, but according to your logic, what you're doing when you sit there and criticize a group of people, whether that's a racial or a religious group of people, according to you, that's the same as incitement to violence. So what we need to do is start enforcing this belief both ways, or at least exposing the doublespeak and the hypocrisy of it, because it clearly does not apply to being critical of white people, being critical of Christianity. If you go and criticize Christians and you talk about how, oh, well, what about the Crusades and how many people died in those? First and foremost, that shows a lack of knowledge of what the Crusades were about and that they were a defensive battle against hordes of Muslims who were trying to take their land and replace their religious faith, and they fought back and didn't allow that to happen. That aside, even if you don't believe that and you just believe that the Muslims were just nice, happy-go-lucky people who strolled up and wanted to get along, but then the Christians just suddenly started killing them all for no reason. If you believe that, wouldn't you then be saying that these Christians, you just can't trust them? What they do is they go around killing people who disagree with them, and so we need to do something about that. Could I not say that you're inciting violence against Christians at that point? When you sit there and look at the history of this group of people and you talk about how evil they are and how they don't change and all that stuff, are you not projecting that we are a violent threat to non-Christians? So it clearly doesn't apply when you criticize white people. That's not an incitement to violence towards white people. If you criticize Christianity, that's not an incitement of violence towards Christian people. But if you criticize the black community, that is an incitement of violence towards the black community. If you criticize Israel or Jews, the faith, or the ethnicity, well, that is an incitement of violence towards Jewish people. Why is this? Why does this double standard exist? Well, first and foremost, think about where you receive these perceptions from. You receive them from the news and from the media. They're the ones who tell you what is an incitement of violence and what is not. The examples I just provided, they tell you that if you're critical of black people, then whoa, you're gonna get black people hurt. You need to not talk about that. You should not talk about the fact that 75% of their homes grow up without a father. You should not talk about the 1350 violent crime ratio. You should not talk about the illiteracy rates. You should not talk about the illegitimacy rates. Don't do any of that because you are inciting violence to the black community. Likewise, if you want to talk about the Jewish overrepresentation, despite being 2% of the population in our government, in academia, in the banking industry, in the media, which includes the film studios, the news studios, the recording studios, the talent agencies, if you want to talk about any of those things, whoa, hey, you are being anti-Semitic, you're going to incite violence towards Jewish people. Now, if you would like to publish an entire book, or if you'd like to create a documentary, or if you want to go on CNN, or you want to write an article for the New York Times talking about how awful white people are, hey, that's not an incitement to violence. Everybody's going to take that as a, hey, this is just conversation. Hey, we're just having a friendly conversation about how awful white people are, okay? Just get with the program, okay? Just hate white people. We're not saying go be violent against them, but you should hate them though. Likewise, you should also hate Christians too, because they're just a stick in the mud who are trying to take away your freedom, and they want to throw you in a cage and shove their religion down your throat and blah, 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 blah. So it's pretty obvious when you just pause, press the pause button, look at society, look at the double standards for what's inciting violence and what's not, and you can see that there is a game being played. And it is an anti-white, anti-Christian game being played. Why would that be? Because the people who control all of our civil institutions do not favor white people, and they do not favor Christianity. So this is why my platform exists. It's to be a representative of those two parties, and especially the intersectionality, as they call it now, of white Christians. We have a way of doing things. We built this country, we sustained this country. The society that we all live in today is the result of European ingenuity and innovation with a Christian moral framework. That's where we live. Those are the people who sustained the country for its first 350 years up until 1960, when we opened the immigration floodgate, pulled down the racial quotas for the country, and embraced multiculturalism and started saying things that are just patently not true, such as diversity is our strength. So what else can I add on this subject? Any other incitements to violence that we need to talk about? We saw this again when we had the January 6th outbreak, whatever you want to call that, a riot, a protest, an election integrity demonstration, whatever it was made clear that if you speak out against the government, then you are inciting violence to the government. You are a domestic terrorist by their own definition, by the Department of Homeland Security. If you openly speak out and condemn the government, which is a constitutionally protected right by the First Amendment, by the way, then you are a domestic terrorist. This is sadly the 2023 world that we live in. You can't criticize other religions. You can't criticize ethnic cultures. You can't criticize your own government. You can't criticize sexual deviancy. You can't criticize anyone without it being called an incitement to violence. And I hope you understand that that's the fundamental outcome that they are trying to achieve with political correctness. It is to say that you cannot criticize any of the changing world around you. The changing demographic, if you criticize it, then you're racist, you're xenophobic, you're going to get people who aren't white killed. If you criticize the falling away from Christianity, then you are Islamophobic, you are anti-Semitic, and you're going to get Jews killed, you're going to get Muslim people killed, etc. If you criticize the government and say, I don't like how you're using my tax money, I don't like how you're going into these foreign wars that don't benefit Americans, oh, well, you're a domestic terrorist and you're going to cause the next January 6th, so you have to go to jail, we have to seize your bank account, you can never get a job again. This is the country we live in, and this is a very, very depressing statement to make. I don't savor sitting down and making videos and complaining I hope it doesn't come off that way. I'm not complaining. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to shine a light on the cockroaches. And the cockroaches metaphorically are these subjects that hide in the dark that we're not allowed to talk about because we're told if we do talk about them, we're going to get people killed. That is not an acceptable standard for a country that was founded on the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech. That is an irrevocable human right. And I've already explained to you why they are trying to remove that right from your life, because they want the demographic to change. They don't want this country to be a Christian country, and they don't want individuality to reign supreme. They want an authoritarian government where they control your output, your decisions, what you do, where you go. That's what the government would prefer. And so that's why they so staunchly show up in resistance to you being critical of any of these categories. You have the government, you have the changing demographic, you have the situation with religion, you have the situation with the culture, the treatment of all of these non-heterosexual, non-monogamous views on sexual morality. These things are completely toxic to society. These have been documented destructive patterns. In every rise and fall of every empire, you see the attack on classical gender roles, you see an attack on faith, and you see an attack on the economy. What of these things have you not seen in America in the last 5 years, more like for the last 60 consecutive years? There has been a consistent attack on the demographic, a consistent attack on the faith of America, a consistent attack on the economy, where we continually to overextend ourselves in these foreign military conflicts. We've seen inflation far outpace wages. All of these things are going in the wrong direction, and they have all come to a head in the form of America no longer being the unipolar power in the world. That's just not even a debatable topic anymore. We see Russia rising, we see China rising, Iran is in this coalition with them, and the rest of the Middle East is going to fall in line behind them because of what Israel is doing in Gaza. And so America has lost its position in the world as the most influential and theoretically as the beacon of freedom and as the beacon of freedom of speech and individuality and all these things. We are not that country anymore. And that somebody has to be raising the alarm to the fact that we are not that country anymore. We do not have freedom of speech. We do not have freedom of religion. We do not have the freedom of self-preservation. They're coming after our right to protect ourselves with firearms or whatever means necessary. All of these things are under constant attack. And so we have to stay vigilant. We have to protect our people as Europeans who founded and created and sustained this country and continue to do so. We have to protect our faith. We have to protect ourselves and our families. And we have to try to acknowledge what's going on with the subversion of our economy. And they're taking our tax dollars, 30, 40, 50% of the money that you make every year, to go and do things that are completely antithetical to your priorities for your nation and your priorities as a Christian and your priorities as a people. They are doing things that actively erode the demographic and the faith and destroy the economy. And I think we are at truly an inflection point in my lifetime where these assaults have never been more flagrant. And so what happens next is hard to say, but what they want you to believe is that simply talking about any of this, talking about the demographic replacement, aka the Great Replacement Theory, aka white genocide, that's an incitement to violence against non-whites. If you talk about what they're doing to the religious faith of the country, pushing this creationism, pushing atheism, secular worldviews, pushing science idolatry. If you don't fall in line with the science idolatry, we'll fire you from your job. Really? We'll tell you you can't shop at the grocery store. Really? Never has the pressure been so great to push you away from Jesus Christ. And so that's where our rock has to be. We have to go back to that. And we have to stand for his name before our own name, even before our people, before our families. If it comes to being divided over this, then that's okay, because that's exactly what Jesus told us would happen. That fathers would be against their sons, and mothers would be against their daughters, and siblings would be against each other, all in the name of Jesus Christ. This is 100% going as planned per the Bible. But that should only serve as a reminder that you are in the right place, you believe the right things, but what is required of you is to stand up and to be vocal about your beliefs and insistent and articulate that there is nothing wrong with them. All of our beliefs are morally unimpeachable. To say that white Europeans created this nation, sustained it for its entire lifetime, and we deserve to protect it and maintain it and keep it that way, that's not an immoral standard. As I always compare it to the Asian countries, China and Japan, both being over 90% Chinese and Japanese respectively, obviously. Nobody has any moral qualms with that. Nobody calls that Asian supremacy, Chinese supremacy. Nobody calls that racism. But when white Europeans stand up and say, actually, we'd like to keep our countries white, it's like, whoa, 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 that is so offensive. That is not okay. You are a racist bigot. You are inciting violence towards other races. Come on, guys, wake up. Detect the double standard. You have to see this stuff. So, I am just about at my time limit because I do have to get on the road and go watch some Alabama football with my family. It's important. I know it's the bread and circus, but it's not about the football game. It's about the time with family. It's about the time with family who openly disagree with me and condemn my behavior. I still go and see them because I love them and because I can put our political and religious differences aside. That is a very, very important attribute for all of my fellow Christians. I want you to remember that. Do not expect your family and your friends and everybody else in your social circle to agree with the things that you say, but you need to be open with them about what is true in your heart. And that is the life of Jesus Christ. That is the reality that races do exist, that there is a difference between the religions. There is, like I said, nothing morally impeachable about these beliefs. These are normal beliefs that are held throughout the entire world and held as recently as a couple decades ago in America. The views around homosexuality, the views around polyamory, the views around race, the views around Christianity versus everything else. If you simply rewind time one lifetime ago, even less than that, to the 1970s, 1980s, 90% of Americans would have been on the same page. So, with that being said, you guys, I think I should probably wrap it up and remind you that your beliefs are not incitements to violence. The behavior of psychotic, suicidal, pharmaceutical, doped up individuals who respond to their religious faith by going and committing jihad or by going and committing murders in the name of white replacement or something. These things are not related to you whatsoever. They're not related to you and what you're saying, because what you're saying is the truth. That the demographic in white European countries is being replaced. That white people do have a negative birth rate. That white people should preserve and protect their societies. As I said, this is all common sense. There's nothing wrong with it. So with all of this said, I would like you to be able to go forward in your life, in your daily, weekly, monthly life, knowing with confidence that your beliefs are perfectly normal. Your beliefs are biblical. Your views around race do not defy or do not contradict what is in the Bible. People have a right to try to preserve a peaceful society. And the fact is, when you combine different ethnic cultures, you end up with unavoidable, perpetual violence. Wanting to avoid that violence that is based on ethnic differences is not immoral. I need to remind everybody of that. This happens time and time again in the Bible, where it says, hey, when you as Israelites go into this other land, they're going to have a different culture. What God says is completely eradicate the other culture. This is why you see Israel doing what they're doing in Gaza, because they believe what they're told in the Old Testament, in the Torah. When you look at Deuteronomy, Exodus, Numbers, what they believe they are told by God to do is to go in and literally destroy, leave not a single survivor of these Canaanite kind of cultures, who they see the Palestinians as. They see them as idol worshipers. They see them as Satanists. But they're resorting to violence to solve that problem. Whereas Christians, we also see people who don't participate in our religion as Satanists, but we are not currently going and bombing countries because of this, because of our Christian faith. And so your beliefs do not contradict the Bible, as I said. If you want to protect your own racial solidarity, there is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. If it were biblically wrong, then the 1.5 billion people living in China and Japan are all living in defiance of the Bible. How does that work? Same thing with India, same thing with most of the continent of Africa being 80+% African. I can go on and on. Racial solidarity is not an immorality. I hope you enjoyed this documentary. I hope you feel a little bit more confident. Maybe you learned a piece or two about how to articulate these arguments that are highly touchy. I completely understand, but you need to proceed with confidence that there is nothing wrong with your beliefs and that you are not inciting violence in any way when you hold these beliefs, when you talk about them in public, when you share them. We are not responsible for the violent behavior of psychotic, suicidal individuals, because the argument goes both ways. If they want to insinuate that you are responsible for inciting violence towards other races or towards other religion, then you can immediately call them out and discuss how the openly anti-white narrative in all of the mainstream, whether that's books, newspaper articles, documentary series, specials on Netflix, the Washington Post writing about it, everybody being openly anti-white, you can say immediately that you are inciting violence against the majority of the country, because that's 60% of the country. Likewise, when atheists say that organized religion has been a net harm on the world, well, then I can say that, well, you're inciting violence towards everybody who participates in organized religion, because what you're saying is that they are all inherently more violent than people who don't. And that means that people who are atheists like you might want to go and try to violently stop people who do participate in religion. And hey, by the way, all of these mass shooters, what religion were they, by the way? Were they devout Christians? Were they going to church every Sunday? Were they engaging in Bible study? Were they in a life group? Were they in youth ministry? Okay, just wanted to check. Now, all that being said, I'm going to have to let you guys go. I could sit here and talk to you forever, but I do have important things to do today. I'm going to go see my family. We're going to spend some time together. So I love you guys. Arm yourselves with education, become articulate on these topics, proceed with full confidence that these beliefs are not immoral in any way. You're going to be all right. We are going to be all right. We're going to get our country back, not through violence, through peaceful measures, but we will make this country a majority Christian country again, and we will fix the racial situation, whether that means redrawing boundaries, redistributing people throughout the United States. Whatever it is our nation has to do, like many other nations throughout human history, we will reorganize, and it'll be around racial and religious lines. And this is not a violent statement. Nobody should go take up arms in this cause. That's not what I want, and that's not what I believe is necessary. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please do check out my other documentaries, Is Racism a Sin? A Racial Reckoning, and America and Israel, Jesus and Judas. These are both on YouTube. For now, they might get removed, in which case you would have to go find them on Rumble or somewhere else. You can join my Telegram, t.me/Beholden To Truth official, and follow me here on Instagram. Follow my backup account at Beholden To Truth official. Until next time, you guys, take care of yourselves with much love in Jesus' name. Amen.